This is some of the work in the area that Devina Manju is sitting back there, and I in central India, the state of Chhattisgarh, and where I think the entire, it's been very exciting to be part of this whole comparative project, because a local context when you try and compare it with our situation and also other political discussions in other countries, it's been just fantastic to be associated with this group. What I'll try and do now is just travel to some of these to central India, and this moment actually is January of 2015, where a group of villagers from a few districts of central India, the state of Chhattisgarh, have travelled to Delhi, and they're meeting a bunch of senior ministers, government officials, and what they're trying to say is that you might come up with a new law for auctioning of coal blocks, but we are not going to allow the coal mines to open. And the reason they're saying that is because they are elected representatives of what is known as village panchayats, or the village councils, and also those who convene village assemblies, the Gram Sabhas. And what they're trying to say is we are constitutionally appointed bodies which can give a consent or refuse consent to mining operations in the area. So you as the central government might view this area as a coal field, but we are going to be talking to the press, we are going to be talking to the ministers to say, doesn't matter if you think this is a coal-bearing area, when you come for approval, there will be contestation. And there will be contestation because we are part of the government, and we are going to assert ourselves as part of the government to say no. And they've done it over a period of time by actually contesting local elections, by becoming part of the government. And in many ways, the Adivasi or the indigenous communities are seen as marginalized. They've been out of the development process, out of the decision-making process. But this kind of assertion that they're talking about is becoming part of the system and opposing it within the system. It's government far away that's taking decisions about this area, but you have to come and talk to us about it. So the area that we're talking about is central India, often also known as jungle bookland, because you don't see Mowgli moving around there, but the whole visualization is very much that. Sarguja is the district that we're talking about in central India, and this area is, as you can see from this map, which is from a report from Greenpeace India. In fact, Karuta is here, and she was pretty much part of conceptualizing this report. It will give you a sense of in a large patch of forest, large patch of what is known as an unfragmented patch of forest outside the protected area system. So there is a protected area system of national parks and sanctuaries in India, but this is a large tract of unfragmented forest outside the protected area system between two very critical tiger reserves. In the eastern side is the Palamu Tiger Reserve, on the western side is the Kanha Tiger Reserve, central western side is Kanha Tiger Reserve, extremely unfragmented. It is also, and the two words that describe this area is Hasdeo Arand, and Hasdeo is the river. You can see that little river and reservoir there. Hasdeo is the river, and Arand is the local word for forest. So it is the forest of this river that people talk about. But the same words are used to describe the place as a coal field. So there is the Hasdeo Arand forest, and there is the Hasdeo Arand coal field. So depending on who's referring to that area, it is referred to either as a coal field or a forest. And so the people who were in Delhi, actually, at least about 60% of them were part of, were coming from the Hasdeo Arand coal field. Not on a map, but otherwise it looks like this. You can see Mowgli. Maybe a few elephants hiding somewhere. The reason they were there is because some of them, or at least their fellow villagers, had consented to this one mine a few years back. They had not refused this mine. And this board incidentally doesn't exist anymore, but it was there when we were in the area. So they had consented to the mine, but what they knew was, what they learned was that the mine was actually creating a lot of problems. It had reduced access, water was getting polluted, so the impacts were being visible. When this mine had come in, actually people didn't really have a sense of how the land would be transformed. So they saw opportunities, they approved they consented to the mine, or also some of them, when we spoke to them, also said that, I mean, there was no way we could have refused. We know that the option to refuse was there. So but once this mine was in operation, and the idea was, what they were trying to do in Delhi is to tell the government that, okay, this is fine, but neither will this be expanded, nor will future mines come up. And that's what they were trying to talk to the government about. This is how the same forest looks like in an EI report. You can see the forests are completely disappeared. It's just the 3 coal blocks. And it's important, the reasoning and the story behind how this mine got approved is also very interesting. Actually, the Forest Advisory Committee, which is not always complimented for great decisions of refusing forest diversion approvals, had said no to this mine. They had clearly said that because of the ecological sensitivity of this forest, because of wildlife, because of forest rights, for a range of factors, this mine should not be approved. However, the then Environment Minister, in a speaking order, gave a justification and gave 6 reasons why this mine should be approved. And the 6 reasons included, the state government has written to them a few times. It also included the fact that this area actually is not part of the Hasdeoran forest, it's on the fringe, so it's okay. The fringe areas can be sacrificed. So 3 mines, the PEKV mine, which is part of the ethnography, and the 2 adjoining mines, the Parsa and the Tara mines, were all approved by the then minister. This is part of the speaking order, which is available in public domain. So there were 6 reasons that were given. They've substantially revised the mining plan to reduce impacts. All those kinds of reasons were given why this mine was approved. Just to give you a visual sense of the people of the area, this is definitely not in the fringe. They are pretty much part of the Hasdeoran forest and finding the elephants in Mowgli moving around that area. Our 2 friends trying to take the interviews in the area. The right here, you can spot the difference. Have you aged these 2 years? No. So, yeah, but what the ethnography really brought out was some very powerful statements about how people of the area were viewing the forest. I think some of it also comes up in the radio series that Tom had put together. I think they very clearly talk about the forest being their god. They also, the interesting correlation of the forest being their god, and therefore you cannot sell it. So I think that, so there are other places where they would say, this part is sacred, but the other part you could sell. But this entire Hasdeoran area is so culturally related to you, and it's either it was a strategic argument or it is something that really they believe. But the fact is, they saw, this is equivalent to our parents and God. We cannot sell them. We are willing to face arrows and weapons with our children. And I think that those are the kinds of statements in the interviews that came out. And I think it's the same narrative that has extended now in the present situation, where whether it is the bunch of the village representatives who travel to Delhi and assert themselves, or when government officials come to them to convene village assemblies and say, why don't you give consent to future expansions, future coal blocks, there will be prosperity, etc. They refuse it on primarily those reasons. And what they add on to it is the experience of the existing mine. That they've experienced what the present mine has brought in. It has not really brought in prosperity. At least the part of the people of the village area that have who are opposed to the mine. So this is a picture from the public hearing of the adjoining coal block, actually, the Parsa coal block, which they've said very clearly that we will not give consent. We don't approve this mine. So I think the conflicts in Hasteo are of probably the central institution that we think is important here to really definitely also highlight is the Gram Sabha. And the Gram Sabha actually literally translates to village assembly, which is a constitutionally recognized forum which has the power to say yes or no. And if yes, under what conditions. And I think this is coming up in 3 different ways. One, at the time of land acquisition, where you could, and this is because this is especially, this is what is known as the 5th schedule area of the Constitution, which is constitutionally recognized, which has special powers where people have to be consulted. In certain instances, that their consent has to be sought. Some laws have taken it on board and recognized the powers of the Gram Sabha, where it is mandatory for government to not proceed. They cannot proceed without taking consent. Unlike many other parts of India where this special situation does not exist. So whether it comes to land acquisition related consent or in another legislation where it's the idea is of recognition of forest rights, both individual and community forest rights, including use, habitation and cultural expression. That's the second kind of contestation. The story behind here is that one of the villages where the current mine is going to expand in the future, I mean the approval is already there, but the current mine is going to expand, is where they had already secured community forest rights. And it's after the rights were conferred, the rights were taken back, saying that your rights are coming in the way of mining. When legally, actually that scenario does not exist. I mean, the law doesn't really talk about it. It's an unprecedented situation. For the first time, it's probably the first case in India, where because it is coming in the way of mining, that the rights have been taken back. And it's, of course, being litigated upon, and decision is far from really close. There's no decision very in the immediate future, but it is being contested. But basically, the second line of contestation is the Gram Sabha very clearly saying that we are the ones who recognize the rights. We are the ones who sent it to the government. You actually only have the power to record it in your registers, and you do not have the powers to take it away. So I think that's the second kind of contestation that's going on, and the assertion of the Gram Sabha, Gram Sabha's role and position to say yes to something that's going on. The third kind of conflict is around regulatory approvals for existing and future mines. There's been litigation which is very clearly led to a conclusion and a judgment of the National Green Tribunal saying that the basis on which Jairam Ramesh, the Environment Minister, gave the approval was itself incorrect. So that approval itself is under question. So it's been sent back to the Ministry for review. The review process is not, headed anywhere for a range of reasons we all might understand. It is not headed anywhere. And even in future mines, there has been a tussle. None of the future mines is so far approved that it's under negotiation. Even the expansion proposal is currently under review on 2 grounds. One, on non-compliance of approval conditions of the current mine, and the other is related to the fact that if there is no approval for the current mine, how can you actually expand? So those are the regulatory tussles that the Gram Sabha and other villages are involved with. So I think I'll finish with that and hand over to Devrina, who will add a few points.
Yes, fine.
Thanks, Kanchi. So I'm just going to add a sort of 2 or 3 case studies of what happens in the context that Kanchi has outlined. So she's kind of pointed out that Schedule 5 of the Constitution and the various acts following have given Adivasis certain rights, which means that the government requires their consent before mining can proceed. A sort of group of lawyers who work on Adivasi rights, I mean, they are usually take cases to court, and some of the cases that they've taken to court have involved forced consent, faked Gram Sabha resolutions, Gram Sabhas which are called, 30 miles away from the actual village which is involved, so, and where often the notice is not sent in the correct language so people can't read it. So all Gram Sabhas being repeatedly called until they get the results that they want, because people have things to do, so people can't keep coming to 15 Gram Sabhas until the resolution is taken. So a few of the cases that Sudha Bharadwaj describes, for example, is one village in the same district who protested the compulsory acquisition of their land by the Southeastern Coalfields Limited. They said that the Panchayat Extension to Scheduled Areas Act was violated in that the Gram Sabha, the village council, was not consulted before the acquisition. But a forged clearance was actually submitted before the acquisition was made. When the 5,000 Adivasis marched to the mines office to protest, the Southeastern Coalfields filed a civil suit against them for the loss of production on that day, and demanded that 6 villages pay something like almost 3 million rupees for the Southeastern Coalfields loss for that day of protest. Another sort of Adivasi woman found that 2 pieces of her land in the same district, in the Raigad district, that's a scheduled area, so only Adivasis can actually, own land in that area, was fraudulently registered by Monet Steel in the name of a non-existent Adivasi. And when she filed a case for fraud, and the manager of that company was found guilty, the case still remained pending in court for 10 years, during which time the original revenue file became untraceable. She eventually, when we talked to her, to Sudha, the lawyer, last year, Janaki Siddharth eventually won the case, but since Monet Steel has built several structures on her land, in actuality she really has no option but to sell the land, because it's now a kind of, it's a post-facto thing, she can't really do very much about it. Another case that she litigated included Shiv Lal Seb, on whose land the Jindal Group, who I think is trying to also set up in Australia, the Jindal Group dumped about 100 dumpsters worth of dust and built a cooling tower. He had an order of removal of encroachment from the collector, but when he approached the High Court, he found that his land had been acquired without his knowledge 5 years before for the public purpose of tree plantation. So the reason I'm mentioning these things in a way is like a little bit of a corrective, that whereas you may have certain kinds of rights under the Constitution and the law, that the power on the ground is very much controlled by the nexus or corporations and governments. And the fact that the Adivasis are still fighting and still resisting in these conditions is an absolute kind of amazing thing, because as Sudha says, no walkovers, we may not win, but we'll keep fighting. But this is the kind of situation that they are facing in India. I mean, Dipesh actually said that about Adani, that in spite of all that they're doing over here, compared to what's going on in India, it's actually really, sort of quite tame. So those 3 case studies were just to give you a sort of sense of what's actually going on in terms of the much bigger context of that Kanchi presented. And I think we can probably stop there.
I just wanted to add one point in terms of the interesting arrangement between the Adani and the public sector undertaking, which is actually all the approvals are in the name of the public sector undertakings. So all liabilities really rest with the public sector undertaking, which is in an MDO, which is Mine, Develop, Operate with the Adani Group. So any violation is actually the violation of the PSU. It's not of the Adani Group. That is why anytime a violation is reported, either journalists are asked to remove the name of Adani, which has happened in one story that was published, or they deny that it is because of us. It is because it's the violation of the public sector. So it's an interesting model where you actually get the revenue out of the mining, you actually do all the operations in the mining, but the liabilities don't rest with you.